the beginning of summer. We're very lucky to have here Demis Buju from Binance. And without further ado, you know me very well, co-founder and CEO of Bondex. But Demis, why don't you make a quick introduction? We're lucky to have him for a second time here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, second time. So we spoke very last time in terms of like just initiating a data journey, but my name is Demis, so you can call me Dem for everybody out there. I run the marketing analytics team for Binance.com, based out in Singapore usually, where I am today. But again, given that it's Web3, you can be anywhere, anytime, right? So yeah, I run a analytics team that supports all of marketing within Binance.com. What does that mean? We are the data partners to anything marketing related, whether it's acquisition. So think about any which way to get a customer, retention, how to engage, how to retain, how to understand your users, and then the overall strategy, PR, and comms. So we help use data in a meaningful way to drive or to derive insights, but also to drive decision making in that order, preferably. So nice to meet you all.
Very, very interesting. A lot to encompass there. High level of responsibility, and obviously data is more valuable than oil nowadays. And interesting how you leverage that from the Binance perspective to drive the decision making and effective, I guess, user acquisition from all types of things. Right? What are some of the things that you make decisions on leveraging that data? It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to first understanding, let's just say from an acquisition funnel perspective, or maybe I take a step back even a little bit more. For anybody who's not knowing of the marketing aspect, everything's a funnel. So how do you think about just general awareness of whether you're a business, a product, a brand, etc.? You just need to be able to have things that make you known, and Bondex can be an example of that in terms of like how do you do outbound marketing so that your brand is known. We have to measure that. You're going to be spending quite a lot of money, and you can see things in a traditional sense: TV adverts, radio, billboards, celebrity sponsorship, endorsements, etc. And we want to measure that, right? And there are some mechanisms to look at that from a survey, panel data perspective. Once you've done that, you want to understand your more immediate channels, let's say socials, paid ads, digital marketing, referral, awareness, referral and affiliate aspects that obviously work on awareness. And you want to measure those mechanisms as well. Each one has its own nuances, and tracking is a big feature of that. Obviously, something's a bit more tricky to really get the exact nuance, but things like paid ads, you can actually track the exact journey. Once you have that from an acquisition perspective, you want to understand your spend to acquisition effectiveness. So think about ROI, return on investment. And from a data perspective, a lot of that can be reactive. So seeing what has happened in the last week, last month, last quarter. Some of these can be proactive. What do you see, and what do you think you can do differently, especially from an experimentation mindset? So that's from an acquisition perspective. But once you have the user, once they've registered, once they've done some activity on your product, you ultimately want to engage with them from a CRM, customer success, and a customer experience perspective to say, how do we better leverage what we've done, product development, even user behavior, to say, you are a customer of ours, we understand you, and we want to like present options for you to be a lot more sticky to them. So that's kind of like how we use it from a marketing perspective.
So it drives a lot of decision makers. I mean, not just about across ROI and defining where the budget goes in terms of the marketing and the user acquisition, but also decisions on product and how to make it more stickier. You know, one of the big things that you're saying is, you know, the user friendliness of Web3 is more challenging than Web2. So I'd like to know, you know, what are some of the things that you think in general we could do with Web3 to make experience more user friendly?
Yeah, I guess when we talk about Web3, there are a few nuances to this, and I think I can talk about two aspects of it. So a lot of it can be on-chain data, and yes, it is clear and transparent because it's all on the blockchain, and you can actually think about it from an aspect of a big database, right? And you can obviously look at it that way. However, it isn't directly accessible, especially when you're starting out as a data analyst, in terms of like as a career, or if you're becoming a Web3 native, from a world of data analysis. So a lot of platforms, projects, and products like June Analytics, even to some degree Nansen, these are great entry points for us to understand what kind of data is on chain and what can you present. I can cover this later. I have a feeling there's probably a question around this later, but SQL is a go-to language, which I covered in the first session as well, that helps
Yes.
you access the on-chain data on June Analytics. Um, that can be a really good way for you to both start your data analytics journey whilst also understanding the nuances of Web3 and especially the on-chain data. The second part of that is the non-on-chain data or the off-chain data, things like social data, um, general spend, etc. I think that's where still there's Web2 learnings that you would want to pick up, and many companies or many projects will still utilize data warehouses or mechanisms by which to store data and actually merge everything together to actually create insights and setups that allow you to dive deeper. And especially from a collections perspective, a lot of Twitter data is not technically on chain, but you would want to see it from a collections, from a project, and even maybe from a influencer driven aspect.
That's interesting, and you've touched on a bit of the skills, and that's something we touched on the last time a lot. And the labor market has changed a lot since we last spoke. I'm not going to talk about the current conditions, but I want to give confidence to everyone, and as we are a talent marketplace, that talent in Web3 actually remains quite healthy. But I think we're going to go from a period of labor shortage to maybe some redistribution from other companies, right? What is your take on that? What do you think? Um, Nothing to do with, again, the market, more about the talent market. We've had
Yeah.
global talent shortage. Do you think we're still in that kind of skills gap for particular tech skills, or do you think that's something that's gonna kind of end soon and we're gonna have more supply and demand?
Yeah. Again, explicitly on skill set and from a entering the space through talents and skills. I think from a skill set perspective, everything is becoming about data. I think you made a little snippet or a little statement at the beginning where data is everywhere and everything. It's more scarce than oil in some cases. That's especially true from a skill set perspective. Um, Everything's about being data driven. Maybe many of you have read on various platforms, studies, and even leadership publications where they're looking for everybody to be a lot more attached to understanding data, utilizing it, and maybe even driving experimental mindsets. So there's no better time to actually pick up a skill, especially as you start diversifying yourself and increasing your employability. Learning and driving data-led mindsets, whether it's statistics, which helps with experimentation. If you ever want to go down the product route, if you want to learn SQL to get you just accessibility to the data, or anything beyond that, if you ever want to go down machine learning, these skills will always be good because they help you become a lot more employable, especially in the tech scene, irrespective of Web 2, Web 3, etc. And additionally, they help you think about things in a more critical manner. And critical thinking, communication will always be transferable. Explicitly, as a hiring manager myself, um, these will be one of those cases where, right now, where aspects are obviously a bit more critical in terms of we're looking for the best talent to stand out. You ideally want to showcase who you are and how you think. So I would actually advise anybody interested in data, make a GitHub account, set yourself up, understand how Git works, because that's what most companies would do. If you truly believe in Web3, go and pick up a June Analytics profile and account. Go and build some dashboards. Go look at what other people are building. Understand the mechanisms behind it and showcase how you're thinking about stuff. That way, from a skill set perspective, you're always going to be ready. And whether that validates your own perception of whether Web3 is for you or not, that's obviously minor compared to actually gaining the skills to go deeper, using the data and making data led decisions.
That's fantastic, Demis. And I think you've highlighted some really important things. I think there's a lot of noise right now, and everyone keeps screaming, across all of the markets, recession. But I think everyone needs to step away for a second and realize that if they can be very much employable, no matter what the conditions are, if they focus on the right skill sets and how to highlight those skill sets, because there's always going to be companies hungry for talent. Um, and looking for the right people. So it's all about, I mean, some of the things that you said are very key. It's just looking how to highlight them properly, and how to pick up on the most relevant skills that they can acquire at that time. But it's everyone can navigate these situations. If we do end up in a prolonged kind of downturn or anything like that, I think people should focus on what you're saying. What would you say are some of the challenges of attracting and retaining talent in Web3? Something that has come up as a talent network, and that I see from a lot of our partners, are that people kind of come in, they learn their skills, and then they move on because those skills become so valuable that they get a better offer somewhere else and they move on. And so the turnover is actually quite high in blockchain companies. Is that a challenge that you're familiar with? What are some of the mitigants that you would implement? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think part of part of what my responsibilities are as a leader and a manager of a team, and it's not just obviously data, but it's across the board, is to ensure that people feel valued and are progressing well. And a big part of that is development. So what does that mean? So there are aspects of coming in, gaining the skills, but utilizing them and feeling valued. I like to try and set up everybody with a PDP, a personal development plan, which I learned many years ago at Amazon, where you start thinking about a clear path towards progression. So obviously, year one, you're gaining skills, especially when you're starting out in your career. You're gaining the technical skills. You're probably developing your critical thinking, communication, and you may get some access to thinking about how to make decisions or how to advise to make decisions. And especially with early stage um, or early in their career employees, you want to ensure they have a good mix of the three so that they understand what development looks like. I would say, and this is true in any time period, if those things don't line up nicely and they obviously don't fit culturally, people just leave. But if all those things align, I, as a manager, I'm able to evaluate, okay, who fits in, who's developing well, can we ensure we give them the right projects or the right mix of projects for them to be challenged, to be valued, and to be able be to be promoted effectively. As you progress and you develop skills, knowledge, and expertise, you want them to be promoted. And promoted is not just about getting more money; it's about more responsibilities, more access to the leadership to be able to drive those conversations that eventually lead to decisions. I would like to think, with a good personal development plan, PDP, with a couple of years, depending on the ambition of the individual, that person could be an advisor to a CMO, in my case, the CMO or a VP of marketing, to be able to say, hey, I have an idea. I want to evaluate it. Could you give me options? And using data, you can actually create a framework to say, this is a good idea, this is not a good idea, or it's somewhere in between. So I guess in conclusion, it would be part of the challenge that I face is maintaining a good balance between workload, diversity of the actual projects there, and making sure that people feel valued and challenged at the same time.
I think you said a lot of valuable things there, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think for someone to stay at a company long term, they need to feel challenged intellectually towards their having good development, right? So they're stimulated and they feel valued and appreciated by the company. And then there's also obviously the financial incentives. But if you choose the right company, you would probably have to give up some trade-offs sometimes between, what's your equity, what's your token, what's your salary package, and you need to try to line up as many things as possible. Obviously, no job is ever going to be perfect. No job is always going to be things that you like, or you can have to sacrifice some things. That I was reading earlier this week that fascinated me was that Gen Xers used to kind of live to work. Us millennials, we kind of we're very mission driven, and now Gen Zs, they will only do work that they enjoy and that is mission driven. And so how, as a hiring manager in a company, which I'm I'm sure that the workforce in general at Binance is very young, but how do you line up across maybe age and culture and geography? How do you manage those different type of perspectives and attitudes to work? And you can encompass that into PDPs and how you manage that type of kind of reconciling those attitudes.
Yeah, sure. I don't think I can comment on the gen aspect of generalization. I don't think I'm capable or even informed enough to comment on the generalizations. But for me, the nature of Web3 is we are all from different cultures, different time zones, different backgrounds, and potentially even every attribute or factor behind the scenes. So part of it is creating a very set culture where it's about open and transparent, an open and transparent um, environment where your opinion and yourself is valued. So as a manager, I have to moderate that to ensure that no one person is dominating the guidance or even the direction of a team. And as a manager, I have to make sure that whether you're introverted or extroverted, let alone whatever age group, demographic, culture, time zone you're in, as a team, our culture is about, are we mission driven? Are we company driven? CZ, our founder, talks a lot about making sure that we're there for the user. Is everybody there for the user? So as we think about our role towards that mission, are we presenting our best self? And I think a big portion of this is, as a manager, as a leader, I have to keep everybody on track. Part of it is for me to communicate them one-on-one, one-to-many, for me to encourage an environment where the individual is able to communicate back to me and back to the group. And when we disagree, we are able to have a constructive mechanism where no one person um, allows another to effectively change direction. So only on merit, we're able to present the best case, and it's still based on the underlying mission of we are here to serve our users.
That was a fantastic answer. And yeah, I didn't mean to kind of generalize on generations as much, but more about how do you encompass a globalized distributed workforce under one attitude and one mission. And you've answered that perfectly well, which is not easy at all, actually. And I think something that
Easier
as
said than
Web3
done. Easier said than done. Definitely easier
is just
said than done. I think, yeah.
and I think it's something that Web3 is more advanced than Web2 in, because you know they've got to they're kind of a nascent industry, so they've gotten to be able to kind of make more horizontal hierarchies and really build teams with a different type of perspective versus legacy companies that have a lot of, let's say, organizational debt, or the way that things are, and sort of stale structures that don't make sense anymore, and they have a harder time to adapt, right? So something I would say, in line with this talent conversation as well, would be, if you got to sit on I want to flip it on you. Now you're not on the hiring manager. You're looking for another maybe data job in a Web3 company, right? What are some of the things that, just like you are setting up your employees and the people that you want to hire for success, what are some of the things that you would be looking at in a company to go work for them, to make sure that it's the right pick for you, to make sure that, you're going to be happy there for the long term?
Absolutely. It's a lovely question, especially because many of our listeners or followers here might actually be thinking about which company to follow. I think be a user, read, explore, think about what you enjoy or are interested in Web3. Go and find the number one company in that specific space, whether it's wallet, whether it's an exchange, whether it's a specific project, whether it's whatever, right? Go and look at what the number one is, look at its competition, and read. Read everything. Read about their product, read about their leadership, read about their values, and see how you feel about that company. I love to do this because that's how I choose what my own perception and ideas are. Additionally, be a user. Look at download the product or utilize the product, whether it's a portal or not. Think from a user perspective. Are they building something that you believe in? Are they building something that makes sense to you? And how would you improve it? How would you contribute to the progress of the app, of the product, etc.? Those core aspects will help you to not only fit in with the company culture, but will also make you start thinking. And any good company, whether it's legacy or one of the famous examples in any of these wonderful books around business and strategy, will always think like, okay, who am I building this for and why? And if you take that approach, no matter how you start, you should be able to progress because you're thinking about the user and you're always adding value. Whether you start as a data analyst or maybe even just an executive in a specific team, let's say marketing, you're always thinking about what is the end, how am I delivering value, and how do I contribute today, tomorrow, next week.
Fantastic answer, and I encourage everyone to take that advice to heart. And these are some of the key elements that everyone should have in mind when they're going to work at a company, no matter what stage they're at, right? And I think it's more and more about, I think, relevance and being mission driven is more crucial than ever. I think we live in a world in which, at least for Web3, to me, the mission is very clear, right? We're trying to democratize the economics of the internet and finance and create a new type of infrastructure, right? And I think that's a mission that it's easy to get behind, and there's so many angles to tackle it from. So I encourage people. I mean, I can't think of another space apart from maybe space exploration, and you want to go work for Elon Musk. But Web3 is a great place for mission-driven people that really want to change the world and that want to change the status quo and disrupt how things are done. I think Web2 started with this mission in mind, but they sort of stormed the castle, and then once they took over the castle, they sort of got comfortable in there, and those initial values and ethos that they started out with did not remain. That's just my personal view on that, and that's why here as Web3, the mission is exactly to challenge that and disrupt it. And to that end, and I don't want to make it too particular. You've seen what's happening now in the market. My view is that it's now more than ever about value versus hype. And something that I've read from your CEO, it's about building products that people actually need and want to use. So, do you have any opinions on that? On, like, we've maybe had a bit of excess in the whole space over the last few years, as it's traditional in a bull market, and maybe a bit of reliance too much on sometimes certain projects on marketing versus the substance of a product. What do you think is about to happen in this new stage of the market? And do you think, what are the silver linings of it? What are the good things? What are the bad things?
Yeah, I guess irrespective of market, the way I look at it, and every great CEO, every great leader, irrespective of whether it's good or bad times, you always build, and it's always a builder's view that will always in the long term win out. I think about every great company out there. Steve Jobs at Apple, he'd redefine the way we look at technology in our hands, in our pocket, etc. So CZ has also obviously on Twitter talks about building, building, building. So, and also thinking about the user. This will never change. For me, I have more internal users, and irrespective of anything else, I am looking to, or my at least my internal mission statement with myself and my team is, how do we make our internal stakeholders in marketing make better decisions? And every model, every dashboard, every framework should be towards that. Whether the market is going up or down, it's not for us to determine that. It's more for us to say, at the point of which a decision is to be made, we're able to deliver on time and as accurately as possible, as possibly as we can. And especially from a, I guess, mission statement perspective, building helps us think about scale, thinks about automation, and also think about an experimental mindset. What we build today might be good for today, but we should always iterate on it. And I think, just like Bondex, we want to make sure that we continue to iterate and drive the best user experience, value, and everything in between for everybody, both on this call and on the platform. Without that, nothing else really matters. To be honest, I'm not a trader. I just have conviction in the space. And like you said, we're democratizing access to a whole number of factors and aspects. And it's not just crypto and finance. It could be even education. It could be um, even aspects around employability, which is what Bondex is doing. So there's many ideas and theses that I have, but ultimately it's about taking ownership. And for me, building on that shouldn't really matter about what the market or the general aspect outside should be or could be.
I completely agree with you. I think it's a time of maybe, for the true believers to kind of stay less tourists, as they say it, but instead of just thinking about it in negative ways, I think you're completely right. It's a bunch of noise, regardless of where the market it's at. People need to follow, like, just focus on what they're building, and is what they're building really useful. And there's a lot of categories beyond finance, as you're saying, that are being tackled. There's decentralized science. I like to think of Bondex as DTAL, decentralized talent, something I've coined as our own term. And there's a lot of other applications that are just scratching the surface now. Now, I think that because the environment might be a bit tougher, there will be a bit of natural selection, and stronger projects and companies will prevail, and they will be a larger part of the wider and general economy. But for that, I think we need a bit more mainstream adoption, and I think even Web2 companies who are now adopting the technology might help us in that. But what is your take on that? Like, what do you see of this as the next, maybe 5 years of blockchain adoption? What are some of your predictions on that end into the general economy?
I think no, these are my theses. This is where I'm setting myself on. Is by no means anybody else's. It's all my personal opinion. And I think 3 to 5 years from now, I do envision a world where on-chain data becomes a lot more prevalent. We will probably be talking a lot about it a lot more in terms of our day-to-day life. We may even see aspects of it built in terms of even programs at school where we're learning about data science in a more accessible way. I think as a hiring manager, I do advise everybody to, if you ever want to get into this space and being a data analyst, a machine learning engineer, or a data engineer even, go and sign up for a free account on Google Cloud Platform, AWS, and there's a whole number of free data tables and schemas that you can access and play around with for free. Typically, these are good first steps. And then in the future, who knows? Great products from June Analytics might even make it a bit more accessible so you can start looking at real data, real transaction data, collections data, etc. What I love about this space for me is much like the early internet, we don't know what exactly is coming. All we know, it would democratize the access to many things in between. For all we know, a lot of what we own in terms of whether it's the cryptos themselves, the wallets, etc., you'll just have greater visibility and ownership of what you do with it. At no point in time were you able to um, think about following a project, being able to get involved, join a Discord, join a project forum, etc., and actually get involved. Much like Bondex is thinking about, how do you actually like develop up? If once you get interested, how do you gain the skills? How do you learn? How do you ask? How do you leverage the community to be able to advise you on what to do? I'm here today, obviously talking, and there's a lot of wonderful people listening in, but there could be a space where Bondex as a platform creates more than just AMAs, right? But actual programs, actual um, tests, environments where people can actually play around, and maybe even maybe one day someone like myself could do a follow on chain test of what a machine learning model looks like, and you can do it step by step with me. How do you predict house prices in your local area? Things like that. These are classically just available on Udemy or Code Academy, but you kind of have to do it through. But how could you do that properly in a group? Those could be innovations that come in. For me, a lot of what I like about Web3 is an environment where you see everything that's happening, you get full access to it, and maybe even follow at your own pace.
It's a great answer, and I like it a lot. And yes, we are planning a large part of our solution to be based on education and aggregating all the best solutions and then implementing testing and certifications that drive into a resume and make it a much more dynamic version or dynamic vision of someone's a candidate versus what you have today, which to me is completely obsolete, kind of a PDF of what someone's done or a LinkedIn profile. And we're nearing the end, Demis, and I do see one question from the audience here that's pretty good. Is what are the advantages of Bondex when compared to LinkedIn? Why would employers use Bondex instead of other job platforms? And why would seekers use it instead of traditional job seeking platforms? So I would say that the first reason would be the democratization of the economics. All of these platforms are middlemen who have kind of used the Web2 value flow. They seek rents and they extract way too much value for what they provide. And the users, which are both employers as well as people looking for opportunities, end up becoming the product, that their data is exploited and they're the product. In Bondex, we empower the ownership of our users, which are employers, recruiters, as well as users, through the gamification and the tokenization. Essentially, our token economy is a true meritocracy. The more value that you add, the more that you will earn. And secondly, one thing is that we want to decentralize hiring or decentralize talent by offering bounty referrals for people to monetize their networks and refer the people from their network to the right opportunities. And companies will be putting out bounty referrals for that, which means that essentially you get a much lower cost for the companies to find talent than paying a recruiter 30% of someone's talent. And it also incentivizes users to kind of stake their Bondex tokens and make sure that the recommendations are very high quality. So it's a kind of a disintermediation of the hiring market today, which is very much controlled by a lot of gatekeepers in the form of headhunters or traditional job portals and other kind of professional networks. And that's my full answers. Thank you, OX
Can I add
Santi,
some?
for taking that great
Can I add
question.
something to that? Can I add something
Yes,
to that,
please,
if that's
Dennis,
okay?
go ahead.
And by the way, thank you for a wonderful question. Maybe I can even talk about as a hiring manager explicitly to me. CVs, LinkedIn's are kind of dime a dozen. I look at them, I scan them, but probably a couple of seconds. I typically look for GitHub links because I actually want to see actual code. Code is a language that, I look at every day and typically allows me to understand how you think, how you present yourself, and how you develop. I can look at early code, I can look at more recent code, especially from a project's perspective, because it looks at, and especially in my domain, SQL, Python, I can look at how you're thinking about projects and ideas. Also, I can think about how you document and present your actual outcomes. So for me, traditional setups don't really tell you much. And in a similar way, where just because you've been at a specific company, it doesn't mean you're competent. But if you actually see work, if you actually see, and I believe in a world where everything's on chain, you fundamentally see what you've done. And as Ignacio said, you kind of validate what you've done. And for me, code is the best way to do it. If I see your code and it runs, by definition, you've achieved the first step. If I see code that's very nicely formatted and kind of well thought out, that's even better. And thirdly, if it's code that I couldn't even imagine, guess what? I think you're a star candidate, and you should definitely be proud of yourself and actually push ahead because you're progressing and developing immensely. So why not?
I love it. Demis, thank you so much for being with us today. It's very incredible. It's inspiring. This should all be very inspiring and to everyone, and also fantastic advice for anyone in a Web3 or data career path, and also to navigate any of the current conditions that we have in the talent market, and something that is important to prepare for. And I just want to encourage everyone again. It's a bunch of noise. Focus on what people are building. Focus on your mission. Focus on your skills, and everything will be all right. We need to step back and focus on the overall mission and high level picture. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Demis. Appreciate you being on here today.